Hello, welcome to this Google Hangout in collaboration with Cabine Voltaire and the First Mile Institute. This is Daniela De Paulis. I'm a visual artist, the founder of Cabine Voltaire, and I'm going to moderate this Hangout together with my friend and collaborator Richard Lowenberg, who is the founder and director of the First Mile Institute based in Santa Fe. This evening or morning, depending on where you are, we're going to present an historical hangout with two pioneers of wireless technology, Dewayne Hendricks and Dave Hughes, together with my friend and collaborator Jan van Marwijk, who is radio amateur at the Dwingeloo Radio Telescope in the Netherlands. We are going to discuss the past, present, and future of wireless technology and ham radio technologies, and you are welcome to ask questions through the YouTube page. I would like to pass the screen out to my collaborator Richard Lowenberg, who is going to introduce you to the biography of David Hughes and Dewayne Hendricks.
Yes, thanks, Daniela. And I think this is a wonderful hangout opportunity with two very distinguished, I hate to use the word, and they probably do too, but pioneers of our current communications age. And one is Colonel David Hughes, retired U.S. Army, and the other is Dewayne Hendricks. Dave Hughes is speaking from Old Colorado City, Colorado, near Colorado Springs, and Dewayne is in Detroit, Michigan, as we speak on this hangout. Just a quick introduction, and we'll do it sort of in a linear fashion. I've known both probably since around the late 80s. As I also actually followed in their footsteps in the early BBS days and moving toward connecting to the internet once it moved into the public realm more than it had been in the early days between ARPANET and NSFNet and all of those iterations that now are transformed into a commercial internet. Wireless communication, which is really the subject of this hangout, you know, in some ways in the contemporary era began with Tesla and Marconi, names we know well, and then there was in the early and through the 20th century a lot of what happened and was interesting was being conducted by ham radio operators. You know, independent individuals who communicated among each other globally and established some early standards and technologies and the applications. That was really the most important part, is what do you do with this new means of communication that makes a real difference in our world and in our lives. And so Colonel David Hughes retired, I believe, in 1973. And by the mid-late 70s, had a Radio Shack PC and a 300 baud modem, and was going around the country, started being called the Cursor Cowboy, wearing his big Stetson cowboy hat, and a great presence. David started evangelizing and was sort of the Johnny Appleseed. Oh, here he comes, true to form, true to character, the Colonel. So Dave, Dave inspired many of us in the early days and was involved in some very early projects that he will tell us about. We'll try to instigate maybe conversation about a few of those. They really set precedent for where we are today and where we're still going, some of which is poorly understood yet. And so now I'll just mention, as we proceed, we will also talk with Dewayne, who played a very important early role in the wireless arena and still does early on through tetherless access and other private venture concerns. And Dwayne is now involved a bit with the Institute for the Future in Palo Alto, not just on where we've been with the with wireless communication and the internet, but where we're going. So I think this is going to be a wonderful conversation. Jan will join us and talk about some of this history as well and about radio communications. So what shall we do, Daniela? Shall we start with Dave? Shall we just let Dave begin on his story?
Absolutely. First of all, I would like to add one more thing that Jan will tell in greater details later. We are hosting this hangout from a very special place. This is the cabin on the Dwingeloo radio telescope, which is a well-known site for ham radio. And Jan will tell you all about the activities that we carry on in this place. And this is the first hangout of Cabine, Voltaire and First Mind Institute hosted from this special place, and we are hoping to continue in this venue for our future events as well. So I will just pass on the screen and speech to Dave for all these interesting stories.
We've got a little bit of dropout, at least we're hearing that. So what are we doing next, Daniela?
I hope you heard me. Did you hear me saying that we are hosting this from the Dwingeloo Radio Telescope?
Yeah, there's just a bit of, okay. We've got a little bit of audio dropout, and so do we want to go with Dave now?
Yes, let's move on to Dave.
All right, so Dave Hughes, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a bit about your story?
Well, Dave Hughes, I'm a native of Colorado, and yes, grew up on a ranch and so on. Went to West Point, fought the Korean War, Vietnam War, and in the late 70s or late 60s, I was helping create the volunteer army, and my field manuals were Future Shock, Neither Marx Nor Jesus, The Greening of America, and The Medium is the Message. And so I rolled up my sleeves and jumped into small businesses of old Colorado City, which is the west side of Colorado Springs, the first capital. And I ran into the first computers, TRS 80 Model 1, 1977, from the Radio Shack. And the reason, and I also had seen the Apple II, but the Apple II that I saw was 40 characters uppercase only. And because it was in a thing called Apple Writer, and I stopped doing uppercase only in the second grade. So I took out installed on a TRS-80 an electric pencil, 1976, and because I'm a hell of a writer. And if you'll notice on here, you could probably see because I'm descended from Welsh Calvinist ministers going clear back to 1590, and I'm a hell of a writer and a hell of a speaker like all my Welsh countrymen are. And so I found a smart modem by 1981, 300 baud, you bet, put up the BBS in order to do electronic democracy. But I also realized that this was so revolutionary that who's going to be left out are rural people because of the costs of the evil empires called U.S. West and the companies, long distance. So even if you used a modem over those costs, so I basically wanted that rural people more than urban, because urban were going to have choices and even ropes and so on. I mean, wire lines in the urban areas. And the next thing is, I was chattering on here when Frank O'Daz from Montana, another cowboy, yeah, Big Sky Telegraph. Do you see that?
No, I'll bring it up. You just keep talking.
And Big Sky Telegraph basically was a program that Frank got a grant for, retained me, and next thing is I found, since I was invited by Stuart Brand to the first hackers conference in California, a man named Tom Jennings, and Jennings basically had solved a problem of hop means to communicate. And so I put all that together, and we had a Unix machine at where Frank O'Daz was in the Western Montana College. FidoNets would hop. Then we had UCP jumping to that FIDO. The FIDO did a UUCP down to my computer, and presently anybody in or close to a high school in Montana, and there's 100 one-room schoolhouses in Montana, were able to communicate across the world UUCP, not internet yet, not TCP/IP, but basically because of that, the next thing is, which I'll terminate here with for the introduction, is then a professor, Dr. Johnson, theoretical physicist at MIT. The MIT professors were worried about the state of math and science in high schools, so he wondered if he could use this. And before we were done, he was from Boston communicating FidoNet to my system and to one-room schools, teaching the math and physics of chaos that was very advanced, even before we got to the wireless. So I'll stop there for as an introduction.
Thanks, Dave. So, at what point did actually you meet Dewayne in this journey?
Well, Dewayne, somehow the word kind of got around what I was trying to do, and Dewayne and I had a couple telephone conversations, and he offered to come out to my house, where I am now, with a Silink pair of radios, loan them to me, essentially. And that link then, because I was basically trying to communicate with my office about a quarter-mile away, which was in turn connected to a T1 from US West. And of course, there were trees in there, but Dewayne came, and I've even got pictures of him on my roof behind that cottage, you know, and then we had a true wireless connection between my computer, which is much more than a bulletin board by this time, and to my office, and then to the rest of the world over the TCP/IP internet. This is
sorry, Dave.
Go back to that picture. There I am in my old Colorado City electronic cottage, because that was the metaphor that Toffler had used. And in there, I had the BBS's Radio Shack and other assorted things. And it was an old tack house where the horse and the carriage of the woman who owned our house back in 1900 was there. Anyway, So he set up the thing, and our relationship started with that Xylink link between my office and my house, and then it went from there. About that time, somebody told the National Science Foundation that Dave Hughes gave a damn about rural communications. You know, computers were going to be a dime a dozen, but communications was going to be a killer because of the FCC, costs that the companies would have to have. And so Steve Goldstein knocks on my front door, says, "I'm from the NSF. How are you doing this?" And he offered me, would I be willing to accept a $350,000 grant from the National Science Foundation to experiment with wireless for education? And I said, yes, but I'm only interested in rural, not urban. They have many choices. And so one thing led to another, and before we were done, it was about 9 years, about $2 million, and Dewayne was involved with many of the things. And I'll go on to show the first free wave that we put up in the San Luis Valley and made a stretch of 30 miles. Yeah, here's the San Luis Valley. You can see almost the little town of San Luis has 30 air miles at zero cost except for the 2 radios from FreeWave, while US West wanted 45 miles T1 for $2,000 a month. So it wasn't just connectivity, it was cost. And then this map shows the San Luis Valley, 100 miles long, 50 miles wide, 30 towns in it, and basically we went to Center, Colorado, about 16 miles to Monte Vista to it. And so here we were then creating a network of wirelessly connected.
Lost.
That, and then about that time, the school district went.
Let's see Dave again. We're not seeing the map, so let's go back to the live camera image.
Okay. All right, but anyway, there was just simply, not only for urban schools, but there was school districts that wireless could connect up, so even the Advanced School District 20 in Colorado Springs, it's associated with the Air Force Academy, high school, in 14 different school buildings were connected. So over 10 years, the difference was millions of dollars of cost that unlimited wireless, where the only real cost was the antennas and the radios. And the month, did you see?
You just keep going. You just keep going.
Yeah, but anyway, that's OMC over 10 years, which was the company that associated with, cost $600,000. It would have cost $2.9 million by US West to traditionally do it with T1s between 25 school buildings wired in a 14 mil. And so all this was reported back to the NSF. Okay, that's probably well enough before I get really into the into the really advanced things.
So let's thanks, Dave. Let's introduce Dewayne and maybe have Dewayne introduce himself and a bit of his story. And I remember one of the things that most impressed me early on about Dewayne was his youthful involvement with Bucky Fuller, and that story is always as I resonate, and knew Bucky, that's an important piece. But Dwayne, why don't you tell a bit about your story? Relevant.
Okay. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. I became interested in wireless when I was a kid in elementary school in the early 60s here in Detroit. I was born in Detroit. It's my hometown. And I became a shortwave listener, okay, SWL. And I had a friend in my elementary school class whose father was a ham. And he took me down into his ham shack one day. His father wasn't there, but I just saw all this equipment, and I was like, oh, I got to get one of these, you know? So I ended up studying, and I got my amateur radio license when I was 12 years old and still in elementary school, okay? So, and I was on my way. I started building equipment, taking apart television sets, all kinds of stuff. So, the high school I went to had an electronics program. So I was able to really get professional education in electronics when I was in high school here in Detroit. And when I went to, so I'm going to sort of abbreviate this, but I went to college, and moving up to 1970, I got interested in Bucky Fuller. The first Whole Earth catalog came out in the fall of 1968, and I didn't know Bucky Fuller from a kumquat, you know, before the Whole Earth catalog, and I read about it, and I said, wow, this is interesting. So that was 68, and then I followed Fuller and learned as much about him as I could, and then I heard in 1970, in the summer of 1970, they were going to do the second World Game Workshop at Southern Illinois University in Carbondale, Illinois. Okay. So I left Detroit and went to Carbondale for that summer, and that's where I met Fuller for the first time. He was a university professor at SIU, had been there since the late 50s, and had set up this department called the Design Department, and that's where the World Game Workshop was being held. So I did that all summer, and it was a peak experience of my life because we played the world game. We simulated the planet. You can read about the world. Just Google the world game. We were the second workshop. So I ended up getting an offer to come to work at the design department as based on what happened that summer. So I left Detroit and I moved down to Carbondale and worked at the design department. I taught psychology in the design department. Okay. Now, you might be surprised, why am I teaching psychology? But that goes into part of my background I don't want to get into right now. But anyway, I stayed involved in things, and to make a long story short, I ended up being offered to become the assistant director of the Information Processing Center at SIU. Okay, so that was a faculty appointment, and I was in charge of the technical operation of their IBM 360 computers. And I did some interesting research on this operating system called VM370, and that work got me an invite to go to work for IBM at the Watson Research Center, and I also got an offer to work for this new company called Amdahl in Sunnyvale, California. So I took the Amdahl offer, and I went to California in the fall of 1976, okay? So I did that. I did a startup, a Silicon Valley startup, and they went public. I made money and bought a house and all that stuff. But anyway, accelerating now, I essentially became an entrepreneur in 1980. So I essentially formed my own company and started doing consulting. So I did that for about 10 years, and that's sort of like towards the end of that, I formed a company in 1990 with a friend of mine called Charlie Brown, called Tetherless Access Limited. And we were going to offer these radios that could allow you to do metropolitan area internet, over an entire city. Okay. Now this is 1990, remember? and we're talking the internet. So we could not raise money, because people would think we were insane. The internet, what's that? Okay. But we persevered and ended up raising some money in 1994. We raised $1.5 million money from a hedge fund. And I was CEO of the company. And that's the time that Richard, you and I met, because we did an installation where you were in Telluride, and then they also did what Dave described. And so a little segue here. I want to jump to 2002. Wired Magazine did a profile on me, okay, and all my work in wireless. And I want to bring that up now because they dubbed me the broadband cowboy, all right? So Dave is the Cursor Cowboy, but I'm the broadband cowboy, okay? Just do a Google on broadband cowboy, and it's me, okay?
Where's your hat?
Hey, no boots, no hat. I don't know how they did that. I really think it had something to do with my association with Dave, okay, to be blunt, okay? So there you go. Okay, back. So the FCC in 1985 had come out with these unlicensed rules, okay, which essentially caused Wi-Fi to be developed. But at the time, we just were using these radios that used a technology called spread spectrum, which the military had used, and it was declassified so it could be used in commercial services. And we got our radios from a company called Silink, which was one of the early companies doing these unlicensed radios. The radios did 160 kilobits and operated on 900 megahertz. And so that's what we used, that technology, to form the basis of tetherless access. So tetherless went public in 1996, but I had resigned as CEO in 95 I resigned, and the company went public after I left, and at its high point it had a market cap of 400 million. But it was gone a year and a half after that because it was ahead of its time. And that's why I left the company, because I knew that we weren't going to be successful because we couldn't get the new kind of technology we needed to do that. So basically in 96 is when Dave got the NSF grant, or 95, 96, and I went to work for him. Dave was the principal investigator for this NSF grant, and as he said, it was involved with deploying wireless technology in rural areas. So Steve Goldstein, the guy at the program officer at NSF, cooked up this deal to do a project in Mongolia. Okay. Now the Mongolia story is really interesting, and I could talk about that for days. But basically, under Dave's grant, we mounted an expedition to Mongolia, and we had to plan it like we were going to darkest Africa. I mean, because there was no Radio Shack that you go to down the corner to pick up parts that you would need. Okay. So the idea was NSF had funded a satellite ground station in the capital of Mongolia, Ulaanbaatar. And so I think it was doing 256 kilobits. Okay. So our mission was to create a metropolitan area network that covered the city of Ulaanbaatar and connect up, like, I think about 10 universities and the U.S. Embassy. Okay. So Ulaanbaatar, I mean, is the big city, and basically most of the population of Mongolia is in that one city. 2/3 of the population. Look it up, Google it. And so we went there after planning this expedition. We were able, since the State Department was involved, we were able to ship all our equipment via the diplomatic pouch. Dun, dun, dun. Okay. So I learned about how all that stuff works.
Yeah, my partner Larry Fox knew that he knew that he could get that stuff passed by the diplomatic pouch. It would get past customs.
So myself and a friend of mine, Glenn Tenney, were the two people that went to Mongolia. we staged through Beijing, and we flew on the Mongolian airline called Miat to Mongolia, to Ulaanbaatar, and we spent several weeks there putting up this network. Now, the interesting thing is that one of the things you have to do when you're doing this kind of work is preparations. And you do what's called a site survey. And so we had to get the Mongols involved in the project to do that. Well, it turns out they didn't do a good job. So when we got there, we found a city with a lot of Soviet-style buildings that were made of brick. I mean, and so we had no line of sight from the satellite ground station to any of the places we were supposed to set up stations at. Okay, so there we were in Mongolia, and I thought we were dead. Okay, so we decided to just do a test, just go and try to set up a link. And guess what? It turned out that all those buildings were transparent at 900 megahertz. So it's like they weren't there. Okay, so we basically had line of sight through these buildings, and you wouldn't have thought it. So the lesson there is, when you can, do a good site survey, but when all things are against you, try anything, and you know what? Sometimes anything works. Okay, never say die. All right. So we were able to set up this link successfully, and I got to tell you, it's like that's one of the peak experience of my life is the Mongolian project and the work we did with Dave on that NSF grant. Okay, I mean, it was really, for the time, pioneering work. Okay, and using the available technology. So I guess I'll close and just say that I prefer the term amateur radio as opposed to ham radio, because the amateur radio service is the official regulatory name for the service. And I think that's important because amateur radio service is a global thing by treaty, in that under reciprocal operating agreements, I can go to the Netherlands, and I have done that. I was there in the Netherlands in 2012. Okay, I went to Amsterdam to do some work there, consulting work, and I was able to use my amateur radio privileges just by contacting the appropriate parties and filling out an application and paying some money. Okay, but that's one of the unique things about the amateur radio service is this reciprocal operating agreement, and we can go anywhere in the world and use our privileges, and it makes it a community like none other that exists. So, thank you.
Excellent.
That's my intro.
Thanks very much, Dwayne. That was really a really nice recap, and it leads right into Jan maybe giving us a little additional talk about amateur radio and his involvements.
Richard, sorry to interrupt you, and before we move on, I would like to ask Dwayne and Dave if they can quickly draw a link between what they've done as pioneers of wireless technology and Eddie Lemar, which, well, is a very interesting historical figure.
So maybe Dave wants to talk about the Hedy Lamarr and George Antile story.
Yes. Okay. It's pretty simple. Well, when I got the National Science Foundation grant, the principal investigator has to do due diligence, go back into the patent history and so on to be sure that what he is setting out to do has not already been done. Okay, so what happened was I was doing that search, and I came across patents, a patent done in 1942. He will show this patent. All right, and there it is, April of August 11th, 1942, U.S. patent, secret communications, and if you look down at the bottom, you'll see the names of Hetty Keisler Markey and George Antiel. I was in love with Hetty Lamar when I was 13 and she was about 25 from her image. And I recognized this is Hetty Lamar, who basically did this patent. Well, and the patent was, of course, the story was that the Germans hadn't figured out a way how to guide torpedoes in a way that couldn't be jammed by radio and and disrupted. And so she and George Antiel sat down one day at the piano, four-hand piano, and in the middle of this, she stops and says, "This is the answer. This is frequency hopping," because they were using, of course, a player piano, and the four of them were, and it was hop, 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 and into her head came the idea is if you had a radio that could hop, 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 frequency hopping, then you would be able to have a degree of security and evasion of that. And so they went to work, and while it was about torpedoes in World War II, the fact was she had, I still got a New York Times article that there was all very secret work with the Navy, and it never got around to being used in torpedoes, but it would actually was able to do this hop, 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 for other uses, and it was picked up by the U.S. military, classified a lot of it, and the idea was that it was not just pretty secure. 902, 928 megahertz was the first radios that came out, that like free waves and so on, but also was reasonably secure from hacking later. And so I had already been awarded by the Electronic Frontier Foundation in 1995. I sat between two others that were, it was pretty funny. They weren't sure what I had done, but the two on my left were Vint Cerf, and on the right was Paul Baran, who of course had invented packet switching. And since I knew how the Electronic Frontier Foundation worked, I nominated Hetty Lamar for an Electronic Frontier Foundation while she was still alive, barely, and she got the thing in 1997 while she was still alive. Now, critics have doubted that that patent was ever used practically, and some people that should know it better. But when she was given that award and the world publicity that went with it, this beautiful actress that basically was also an inventor, a man named Scriber Marshaki emailed me, and let's see the okay. No, I want to see the
Just keep going.
Scriber Marshaki,
Okay, just keep going.
the naval stuff. Anyway, what he said was, oh yes, the Navy, had actually used that patent. So here is my summary of the first actual use of Hetty's frequency hopping patent. And he, Scriber Marshaki, I want to read that again.
Yeah, keep going.
Said that they used it in order to create a sonobuoy, a naval sonobuoy that would float out on the Pacific or Atlantic, could detect submarine sounds, and then an airplane could fly over it and get using frequency hopping according to the patent, and see if you down at the bottom it says that when we, Hoffman Radio Corporation, the contractor, were provided a copy of the Markey-Keisler patent, since it was dated a decade previously, we assumed it was an existing secret technology devised by some clever electrical engineer working under a Navy contract, and we designed the radio communications following the patent. It worked very well from the beginning. So her patent was actually put into use for military security purposes in there. And while it's an overstatement to say, see, well, some of the concepts that came out of that also were picked up for CDMA for cell radios. And then it also, and today it's called Bluetooth. Bluetooth is the same frequency hopping that Hetty basically conceived along with Antil. And I'm happy that the love of my life, Hetty Lamar, got proper recognition, in her very late years.
Thanks, David. We now give the floor to Jan van Mavelijk, who I've been collaborating with for the last 5 years. Jan is part of the CAMRAS organization, which is the acronym for Sea Angular Astronomy Station, here at the Dwingeloo Radio Telescope. He's a radio amateur. He had his license for many years, and his main interest is moonbound or Earth moon. So, Jan.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'm first to say I'm very impressed by the stories of the two cowboys. So, well, let's see what I can add to this. I'm a ham radio operator or a radio amateur since 1978. I played with the packet radio in the 80s, so in the pre-internet era, and since 2006 I'm very much into moonbounds. Well, all over the world, radio amateurism is going down a little bit because some people look at it as a more or less old-fashioned thing, but I'm of course I do not agree because we are in a wireless world more than ever, and well, radio amateurs play their role in that area very much. And moonbounds is still one of the things that's growing. Many people develop interest in moonbounds because it's one of the biggest things you can do as a radio amateur. I mean, imagine the moon is 400,000 kilometers away, so you bridge 800 kilometers every time you have a contact. And the moon is a very bad reflector. Only 7% of the energy comes back, and it's a globe, so it scatters in all directions. And if you put the attenuation in the figure, you have a 1 with 27 zeros. And when you read that and you think, oh, let's stop, that can't be done. But still, it can be done. I myself have a 3-meter dish in my backyard. It's a small dish. And with technology of today, I hear my own echoes, and of course that's not the purpose, but other people need to hear my echoes, so that way I can have contacts with other moon bouncers. And we are here in the Dwingeloo Radio Telescope. That goes back to 1956. It was the first radio telescope 25 meter in the world, and it made a lot of fantastic discoveries, and it got out of professional use in the mid-90s, and our foundation, the CAMRAS Foundation, started working on it in 2004, 2005, and it's recently completely restored. It costed 1 million euros, but now it's shining and fantastically looking and working like clockwork again. And one of the things we radio amateurs do with it is moonbounds. And you can imagine that our moon echoes with our 25-meter dish are very, very loud. But I will show you around. The Cabine Voltaire logo showed already the dish on the outside. Maybe you can show it once again, and then we will have a quick tour on the inside. Daniela is now searching for the, yes, there it is. And I will now switch to my other camera, and then I will show you around. There it is. Okay. Look who's there. There's Daniela behind the computer. And we are in the cabin under the dish, and when the dish rotates, the cabin also rotates. Complete construction weighs 120,000 kilograms. That's Ene.
Hello.
Another radio amateur and moon bouncer. And now we go to the radio we use for doing moon bouncer experiments. Well, radio amateurs over the world will recognize this one. It's a TS2000. We do moon bounce on 2 meters, 70 centimeters, 23 centimeters. Now I'm going to show you the panels inside. This is the panel where the coax cables enter the telescope, and from here they go up to the focal box where the real antennas are, because the dish, the telescope, is only a mirror, of course. Some instrumentation. Some measurement gear. Now I move slowly to the left, and here you see some old equipment from the 70s that was used by the radio astronomers. It does not function anymore, but we kept it here for historical reasons. And on the left you see an old writer recorder. Now we do that with computers, but then it was all with paper. I will make a quick move to the other side. Outside is dark. Another analyzer. Well, this is a nice detail. I will zoom in. We had ourselves a belated Happy New Year, so we ate some traditional Italian panettone. Daniela can tell that, pronounce that better than I do. Maybe you explain, Daniela.
It's definitely panettone and prosecco.
Prosecco, yes. And I will end my short tour with some QSL cards. Radio amateurs know what they are. When we have contacts, in our case via the moon, we send each other those cards to have proof of the contact, and well, those cards we collect. And well, that's one of the things we do here. I switch to my other camera.
And at some point, we should grab an image of Dave and Dewayne and bounce them off the moon and send them back.
Well, I have two final, very short things. When I was just a lad of 75 years old, Sherpas had heard about my pioneering and emailed me and asked me, could I go up on Mount Everest and help them, because if young Sherpas don't learn oral English by the time they grow up, they're doomed the rest of their life carrying heavy loads for Westerners for $5 a day. So since we live close to Pikes Peak, I went up and down Pikes Peak at 75. My Korean War legs were still working. And I trekked up to 15,000 feet on Everest and got wireless radios from Cisco and connected to them. And there's a picture of me standing on a stupa at 15,000 feet. The hill behind it is 22,000. And the link went 5 miles off an ancient Buddhist monastery relay to a dish antenna, who then went to a satellite, which came down in Kathmandu. A second satellite went up and down into Hawaii, undersea cable from Hawaii, and a fellow Sherpa in Pittsburgh, who's a techie, knows Nepalese and English, taught using early Skype. It taught classes in English to those kids in Namche. Well, but my last part, though, is I'm 86, getting along in years. And so I want to just show this thing. You know what this is, I think. Yes. You know what that is, right? So on my tombstone is a QR code. When my wife of 57 years died 4 years ago, she told me before she died she wanted me to write. I'm a hell of a writer because of my Welsh background. And so I said, yes, but Gutenberg is dead. I've been trying to bury this guy for the last 50 years. And so I will do a powerful website, which is called DaveHughesLegacy.net. And I put this QR code on my tombstone that's done except for the death date, so that when my great-granddaughter, and I have 3 of them, show up when they're 18 and I'm supposedly gone with my carbon, and say, hey, Gramps, I'm thinking of marrying this guy, and if you, what do you think? And I'm going to say, he's no damn good, don't marry him, and she'll, knowing my granddaughters, they will marry him anyway. But if she comes back 5 years from now, and from then, and says, hey, Gramps, it worked out using her smartphone to talk to me, then I'll be capable of changing my silicon mind. And my point being the perpetuation of the species, that what's important is what's in one's minds. And that's what, that is what I'm doing. So after I'm dead, a lot of people are eager to come to my tombstone and communicate with my belief system on there. And I'm still trying to figure out how Siri does it with Dwayne's Apple, but that's the way I want to have it go out. So I may be around lecturing for a very, very long time. That's all.
Thanks, Dave. We're getting close to the end of this, and I know we discussed with Dwayne maybe a bit of conjecture and thought about where things are going, not where they've been, but where things are moving forward. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, Dwayne? Any thoughts? Open spectrum issues. A lot of there's a lot of controversy about just the nature of our network society and the privatization, the openness or the closedness of it, and the future of wireless versus fiber or other technologies.
Thanks, Richard. I guess the internet is under threat, as is wireless, because of the regulatorium. It's regulations, okay? That's what impedes innovation, okay? The internet that was conceived by people like Paul Baran, Vint Cerf, and others, Robert Kahn, people have lost sight what that internet is. I I'm involved in a project at the Institute for the Future in Palo Alto, California, called Second Curve Internet. And it's a 10-year project to look at how we can reinvent.
Oops. We have a little problem.
Seems to be a connection problem. Let's wait a few seconds until we get Dwayne back. I know he's on his iPad, so we've got some problems earlier as well.
Yeah. So, any other topics we want to cover, Daniela? Is Jan want to? I think I interrupted Jan earlier, but.
Well, I also wanted to hear about the future of wireless communication. I was very interested in this topic. Let's hope that Dwayne is coming back. But also, I would like to ask Jan about the future of ham radio. As I've heard, there are some controversial ideas about it.
Okay. Yeah, well, controversial, yes. Of course, there is a lot of need for spectrum. A lot of commercial things want radio spectrum, and there is only limited space. And while radio amateurs, the numbers of radio amateurs is declining, the spectrum is, well, under heavy threat. I mean, governments and a lot of commercial companies want to take over the spectrum for all kind of usage. And well, it would be a great loss if we lose spectrum. We don't use so much spectrum as radio amateurs. We are happy with only small parts, but all over the spectrum, from the very low to the very high. I mean, on all frequencies, there is still a lot of work to be done and things to discover. We are relatively many. I mean, many people, all three individuals experimenting in their own way, doing all kinds of things, can bring much more discoveries than companies that have to spend a lot of time and paying for it. We all do it in our free time. So I really hope we can keep the spectrum we need. And I see Dwayne is back, so we can listen for him, I guess.
Thanks, Jan. My iPad crashed. That's why I lost. Okay. Well, we're all okay. So we need to really remember what the internet was all about at the beginning and try to get back to that. There are a number of projects out, not only ours, the Second Curve Internet project, but others to do that. As far as wireless is concerned, I'm part of what's called the Open Spectrum movement, which is about developing new wireless technologies by using wireless devices that are different from Marconi's, okay? And that if you look at Maxwell's wave equations, there are other solution sets than the one that Marconi used, okay? And so David Reed and some other people are building these new radios that are essentially orthogonal to the ones that are in use today, which means that today's devices can't hear these new devices. So you can share the same spectrum. That's why we call it open spectrum. So what we have now is a construct, which is the radio spectrum, but that isn't reality. It's something else, and that's what we need to rediscover, just like we need to rediscover the internet and implement it was originally intended. That's it.
And I just want to add, you know, part of my interest in all this has always been to think of this information environment in ecological terms. The way we're now beginning to think about how we deal with other ecological constituent aspects like water or soil or other things. We don't think about our electromagnetic and our information environment as an ecosystem, and we're polluting, we're manipulating, much like industrialism in the early industrial age and the smokestacks and all. I think we ought to be thinking about the spectrum and about our applications and about the benefits much more in ecological terms, and ultimately it affects our economic thinking as well. With the coming of the internet, I remember going to meetings in Washington at the Department of Commerce and other places where they said, well, we have to treat all information as property in order for it to fit into our existing system. Information is not necessarily property, and we're going to get into deeper trouble if we consider it either public or private property, and many people are now considering this third category of the commons, what Eleanor Ostrom got the Nobel Prize for in economics in 2009, considering the commons as part of the quality of life that our economic systems are supposed to be geared toward. So I agree with Dewayne. We have a long way to go, and we're under threat, and there's some real important work to be done, not just technically, but in terms of social and cultural understanding. And back to what Dave was talking about, using these tools for education, for learning about our place in the scheme of things and how to improve our lives and livelihoods.
Thank you, Richard. I think we can close on this note. I would like to thank all our participants for the very interesting discussion, and I would like to remind you that Cabine Voltaire is a platform for live debates on art, science, and anything interesting out there. So, First Mile Institute is a great collaborators, and we would like to invite you to our next event to be scheduled in a few weeks. In the meantime, we say bye to everyone with a virtual coffee from our cabine. So see you next time, and thanks again to Dave, Dewayne, and Jan.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.